some of our staff that's been working closely with the dairy application. Callie Hastings is with us from Fat Toad Farm. She's going to share some of her experience. I'll just say quickly, if you are on, please mute yourself so we don't get too much feedback. If you're on your phone, you can press *6 to mute. We're going to finish up with a good chunk of Q&A as well. So as we get to that section, if you're on the phone, you can hit *6 again to unmute yourself, or just on the toolbar in the middle of your screen, if you're using your computer to connect, there is a microphone button and that will mute and unmute you. So I am just going to do some higher level broad strokes of the program to sort of update folks on some of those primary details, and then I'm going to hand it over to Callie to share a little bit of her experience. And then I'm going to open it up to our dairy experts. So Evie Flory, Laura Ginsberg, and Diane Bothfelder are all here. They've been working to develop the application, to review applications, so are really knowledgeable about how the process works and some of the issues that we have heard people are encountering. So the overall goal today is to just help people navigate this process, answer any questions that folks have, reduce the friction, and encourage people to complete and submit applications. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. So again, here to talk about the Vermont COVID-19 Agricultural Assistance Program, the dairy application specifically. This presentation is designed with producers in mind. We'll have another one tomorrow that will cover some more general tips. This will be a little bit more technically focused on the application details itself. And then we'll have two for producers on later in the week. And if you hear my coworker, I apologize. She's not terribly polite. Quick agenda, go over some high-level program details. As I mentioned, we'll hear from Callie Hastings at Fat Toad about her experience, and then I'll turn it over to the dairy experts to talk a little bit about some of the common issues that we've heard are coming up for people, and then we'll end with a hefty Q&A section to make sure that anybody who is here has specific questions that we can get those answered. If questions come up during the conversation prior to the Q&A and you're on your computer, you can use the chat function, submit those questions, and we do have people moderating that chat. So if it comes up and you're afraid you might forget it, go ahead and throw it into the chat section, and we will be sure to return to that for the Q&A and get that question answered. This is a good reminder that I should probably record this. So I don't know, I might ask if Abby Willard could go ahead and record this for us. Some quick background. Many of you probably know this coronavirus relief program was made possible through the CARES Act, and then was created by the legislature and the governor through S351 and subsequently Act 138. And so there was $25 million allocated for this program to assist dairy farmers and producers for losses related to the COVID-19 pandemic. An important point here that we're hearing that a lot of people are sort of confused by the name of this, this being a grant program. So we've referred to this as a grant program. It may not be the best title, but the reality is it's not a competitive program. You don't need to submit with a traditional grant program. You don't have to put a project proposal together. Anybody who is eligible for this program and can demonstrate losses will receive funding. So we just want to make that clear. It's not a competitive program, and if you are eligible and can demonstrate losses, then you will receive funding. Some important dates. So the application is currently open. Review is happening on a rolling basis. The agriculture application closes towards the end of October, early November. And then payments, as I said, because reviews are happening on a rolling basis, payments are also being issued by the Department of Finance and Management on a rolling basis as well. So this is a definition of a dairy processor as it relates to this program. So you must be currently in good standing with the state of Vermont. It's pretty straightforward. So a person, partnership, unincorporated association, or corporation who owns or controls any place, premises, or establishment where butter, cheese, cream, buttermilk, infant formula, ice cream, yogurt, and other dairy products identified by rule by the Secretary are processed. So the other eligibility considerations, you must currently be producing milk, or if you're not currently producing milk or processing milk, processing milk on March 1st, 2020, and cease production, but you have a good faith plan to restart production or processing of milk. And then you must accurately demonstrate economic harm that occurred or accrued on or after March 1st and before December 30th, 2020, through evidence of lost revenue or expenses related to business interruptions. So this is an important time frame. This program is designed specifically to address economic harm within these dates. And then you cannot be a recipient of another state grant from the CRF funds. This is a list of common losses and expenses. We'll cover some more detailed examples of these, but this is just sort of some general ones to keep in mind. Lost revenue due to reduction in sales, equipment purchases because of COVID-19, personal protective equipment. So most of the big ones are related to loss of sales, loss of milk payments, market interruptions like that. But it's important to note there are other things that you can claim beyond that as well. And then I just wanted to mention also the funding caps. I think this is important. The application obviously takes some effort. It takes some effort to gather all the documents, to sit down and take the time to do it. But if you endeavor upon that, and we hope that you do, there is real money on the table that's available to help folks mitigate some of the economic harm that they suffered. So these are the caps, and these are based on milk per day. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to hand it over to Callie to talk a little bit about her experience. So Callie's from Fat Toad Farm, and she has successfully submitted an application, and so we thought she would be a good person to have on here, and wanted to thank Callie for taking some time to share. So Callie, it's off to you.
Hi. Yeah, we were fortunate enough to receive some of the funding when it came out, and it was quite a quick turnaround, I thought, in terms of how these things usually go. So we applied as soon as it came out and tried to have as much documents ready ahead of time before I started the application, just because it can get frustrating to like start and stop and start and stop. But I still did need to kind of go back and forth a few times during the application. But I think probably the case is if you have a lot of that, if you're keeping records on a lot of that stuff already, it's relatively easy because you're just pulling from your records. But if you haven't been, then you kind of got to figure out how to organize that, and questions of what is submittable. I don't know the answers to those, but I had to ask a couple of questions along the way as to what form things could go in as numbers. But for example, how much milk we're processing per day this year versus last year. We have those in production records from our daily make day. So we make goat's milk caramel. So we're using pounds of goat's milk per day. So we keep track of that in an Excel spreadsheet, for every production day that we have. So we were just able to pull our Excel spreadsheet and upload that for that information. And that was, just a simple Excel sheet. So there may be more questions on how that needs to look, but that worked for us. And then in terms of sales numbers, because you need to put in your sales numbers for this year versus last year, that was a little tricky because I thought it was going to be like 2019 and then 2020, and that we would just like upload QuickBooks for each month. But I actually needed a document that combined the numbers into one, because it's just one upload for that. And so we did it by doing a QuickBooks. It was a sales by customer from March 2019 versus March 2020. That was just an example of the month that we had. And so that did a summary comparison in one document. So we did that for each month. But I know that's something that we got a little bit stuck on. I also found that when I had to go back and forth, like if I couldn't do it all at once, I had to go back and fill out like the first page of the application each time and like check the boxes every time, which wasn't a big deal, but that didn't seem to save when I was doing it. I originally stumbled on setting it up because I signed us up as a dairy producer as opposed to a processor, and then my ID number wasn't working, so I had to get help on that to just make sure I was in the right form. And also for us, like every question I had was answered very quickly, so it was great because we could just keep moving on it and get it submitted. And then I guess the area that I wouldn't necessarily have put anything in for was the new expenses. But talking with someone on the team kind of helped me understand what the goal of that was. So we had new expenses because we decided to do a bunch of work on our online and e-commerce platforms. And so we had time that, for example, me as a staff person or another employee was being diverted from production or other things that we would normally be doing to focus on e-commerce and online sales that wouldn't have happened if it weren't for COVID, because that was kind of our sales channel that helped us through. So I was able to submit those hourly. Basically, I took our hourly rates, multiplied it by the number of hours that we worked on e-commerce and that kind of shift that we had to make, and I was able to claim that as new expenses related to COVID. So that was helpful. And I think the only other hiccup we had was at the end, you have to, when you're like finalizing the form, you have to mark if you want assistance with anything with your business, and you just have to like pick I found that it forced me to pick something, and I just like picked marketing, but then I still had a hard time getting it to like do the final submit and to go through. So I'm not sure if anyone else will run into that, but I just like did it enough times, enough different ways that it finally just like went through. Yeah, so those were kind of our stumbling blocks. I would say total time was maybe 2 hours at the most. But that also included being able to pull information from QuickBooks that was already in there. We didn't have to like, create all that. And 2 hours is probably wasn't really that much. It just felt like it with all the back and forth. But yeah, we submitted it. You get affirmation or confirmation very quickly in your email. And then I want to say like 2 or 3 weeks later, we received the check. So yeah, it was awesome. It was great.
Thanks, Callie. You mentioned you reached out for some help. How did you reach out, or what chance? We have a ton of resources, so I'm just curious, sort of like who you contacted and how that worked out for you.
I think maybe originally Laura, and then I got, is Tina? Who's the other person on the team? I can't remember the name of the other person. Terry?
Yeah, Terry.
Yeah. And then she was helping me, and then Laura helped me with a couple other pieces. So it was, and Terry called me like as soon as she got the question. So that was helpful to just like have someone on the phone, so you could just like, instead of going back and forth on email a million times, just figure it out. So yeah, it was email and phone, and they helped resolve things very quickly.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So just to go off of that, there's also, the website has a ton of other resources. There's an automated chat feature. You can put questions directly into that. If those aren't answered, as Callie said, you can call. There's a number listed there. There's a number of email addresses. We're really working hard to get responses to people as quickly as possible. So you're certainly not alone in trying to get through this process. But I think that's really great to hear. It's great to hear it didn't take too long. And we'll share a little bit too of some tips on what documents you might need to gather. I think that's slowing a lot of folks down. It's just sitting down and getting halfway through it and realizing, oh, I need this P&L or this income statement, and then having to sort of put it aside and come back to it. I know you mentioned that it forced you to go through the different steps every time you log back in. So I think that's something we noticed too. It's not that it doesn't save your progress. I just wanted to make that point, but it does force you to start at the beginning and just click through the different pages that you've already filled out. So it's a slight annoyance, but it's not like if you walk away, then you lose all the information you've put in there. It just has you walk through each page again to confirm that it's accurate. So wanted to make that point.
One other thing I got messed up on was, so my understanding is you can like resubmit in the coming months if you continue to see losses for additional claims. And so I had put in like August, I submitted in July, I think. I put in August, September, and October sales for 2020, I think, thinking like, oh, when I need to resubmit, those will be uploaded. And that created a snag in the application. So maybe someone wants to speak to that later in terms of how you should look towards if you're going to resubmit claims later. But
yeah, I think one of the panel of experts here can probably speak to that resubmission, because I know that's coming up for a lot of folks as well. I also didn't mention the obvious, but there is a link on our website that will take you to the application page for this. So it's all done online. Unfortunately, there are not paper applications available, but there is support. Vermont Housing Conservation Board is available to help people work through the application as well. So if there are folks who aren't digitally inclined, we have some resources for them as well. So great. Well, Callie, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I don't know, you may have to go. Does anybody have a specific question for Callie? I'm just going to open it up to our panel of experts next. So, all right. Well, hearing none, thanks again. Right. And I'll turn it over to Laura, Evie, and Diane, and they're going to talk a little bit about some common issues that we have heard people are encountering and some ways to sort of navigate those. So hand it over to those guys.
Thanks, Trevor, and thanks, Callie, for that great overview. I'm actually going to share my screen for a minute. I just want to make sure that folks can see what the application login looks like and know that they're at the right spot, because that does seem to trip a few folks up. So we'll start there, and then I think maybe what might be best is if there's specific questions or something that folks would like us to cover, that we can just kind of jump around within the application. I can show you some common things that go wrong, and folks can jump in and interrupt and ask questions as we go, if that works. Evie and Diane as well. You should feel free to interrupt me and provide additional feedback if there's something that I'm missing. So hang tight while I share my screen here. Okay, we'll give it a minute to load. So can everybody see? It should be a login page at this point.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks, Trevor, since I can't see anybody anymore. So the page here now is the agency's webpage for this program, the Ag Assistance Program. Dairy Assistance application is the one here with the cows, is Dairy Assistance. And so dairy farmers and processors both apply here. And there's two links right at the top of the page. Once you register to apply, you no longer need to register. So once you're in the system, you're in. If you are a farmer and a processor, you will need to register as both a farmer, also called a producer, and a processor, using the codes that Trevor spoke about.
Come on, Goober.
And then you can log in to continue your application. The login page looks like this. So you'll see that again, you have all these options to register for the different grants. The agriculture grant, dairy is what we're here for, but you no longer need to register once you've gone through that process. So you'll log in to that. And this is our test site. So it looks similar, but not exactly similar. And as soon as it comes up, you want to click on the new application button. So I'm not going to walk through submitting an application because we have webinars that have already done that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this fake application from a real registered processor that we have. So if we have anybody on the phone from Dolcetti or anybody that knows them, this is not their real application. It's one that I've made up earlier using their registration number. So you'll be able to access your dashboard. You can see I've got a few other fake ones here as we've been testing the different applications. And this is where you'll go if you need to log off and log back in. You'll click on the pencil edit button to reopen an application that you started and not finished. And once you've submitted it, you can view it. So common things that kind of stump some applicants here. First of all is many of you have already sent us a W-9. If you have not sent us a W-9, it is critical that your W-9 information as you enter it matches your W-9 document. So that means not putting in extra information, not putting in different information, entering it exactly as you do from a W-9. And then that adds a little bit of processing time because we have to verify it, but generally that process takes place within a couple of days. Then you go through and you answer a bunch of eligibility questions that make sure that you are able to receive these funds. And then we get to the point where people start to have problems. And this is where you upload documents. So this first section is all about proving to us that you actually process milk. So we ask for an income statement or profit and loss statement comparing 2019 and 2020. You can see I've uploaded one test document for all of the uploads. You can also upload the same document if it has 2019 and 2020 in it. So no need to create separate files for each month and year. You can make one larger file. That's totally fine, but you will have to upload something into each block. The other thing to show here is that you can click on these documents in review. And if you've forgotten what you submitted, this is really helpful. And what this one will show is, I'm going to bring it over here. So now you should see a Word document of my proof of decreased production table. And this is just a really simple way for us to see, okay, in 2019, in the months of April and May, you purchased a certain amount of milk at a certain price. In 2020, we can see that you purchased significantly less. So there's lots of ways that processors keep track of this information. And we are flexible in what we accept as long as it is consistent and matches with the level of pounds that we understand you to be processing based on your registration. So that's, a pretty simple document tracking. Other people, you might have make sheets, or you might have money that's going to the checkoff program indicating how much milk is being processed. So there's lots of ways to satisfy this requirement. Then if you have had sales decreases, which we anticipate that pretty much everybody has, you'll go into this next section where it's asking you by month to supply pre-COVID sales, which would essentially be 2019, or generally 2019, and then 2020 sales. There are some specific scenarios where we could accept something other than 2019, but that has to be a discussion with the review team prior to your submitting that. So then what we would ask for here is official profit and loss statement would be ideal, knowing that not everybody uses QuickBooks or some sort of formal financial documents like that. We'll accept, again, a number of things. It could be an Excel document. So then here is, you can see, I've just generally made up some numbers for sales loss. So we want to see your profit by month and your expenses by month. The important thing to note here is that sometimes people get confused and enter the wrong numbers. So we don't really, we don't take into consideration your expenses or the difference between profit and expense. We're only taking into consideration your sales. And so you want to enter the number exactly as it is in the documentation that you provide. So if it says 17,287 and 50 cents, if you do not enter that 50 cents or you round it up to 17,288, we're going to send it back to you for revision. So please make sure that all numbers match your documentation. So we've got that. And now you can see that I've entered my numbers. I've uploaded my documents for the 2 months. Whatever months you claim in the first section, we would anticipate that you would claim in the second section. And then you provide a narrative. As much information as you can provide. It doesn't have to be a novel, but something that just helps us understand the situation that you're in. So in this particular case, I just made up an example and said that restaurants and outlets that sell scoops, all of wholesale accounts stop purchasing and we're not set up for retail or direct sales. So that to me would say, okay, I totally understand that restaurants and wholesale accounts weren't buying. So that is a justifiable explanation. And now in this other section called other economic harm, as Callie was mentioning, you can apply for any number of things as long as they have a direct relation to the pandemic. So here I've selected personal protective equipment, PPE. Then you have a drop-down menu here for reason for incurred loss or expense. And then you get a narrative again to explain that. So I've uploaded the same test document just for sake of showing what we do. So what we would do is say if this was a receipt or an invoice, we would open it. So I'm just going to open that document up. And I see that I've not included anything that is with this line item. So that's another common error, is that there's no documentation or the documentation is incorrect or doesn't show the line item cost. And so again, you want to make sure that whatever you are uploading to prove your purchase or additional loss matches the dollar amount and matches here the category of loss or additional expense that you're selecting. So if you select PPE, don't group it in with an invoice that includes an updated website, because that'll have to go into a different category. So you just really want to double check your dollar amounts, make sure that you've uploaded the correct documents. And then if you have received any other compensation from other state or federal programs or insurance programs for losses that you are claiming here, then you would click yes, and you'd have to enter that dollar amount. We provide limited explanations for what people could include here, because there's any number of programs that people could have applied for and a multitude of ways that they could have used those programs to impact their business. And so it is up to you, which you certify before you submit the application, that you are not receiving funding for duplicative losses. So I think I'm going to leave it at that and stop sharing my screen so we can see each other again. And Diane and Evie, do you have anything that you want to add at this point?
I would just add, Laura, if people are utilizing QuickBooks, that staff at the agency are not experts in how you have your QuickBooks set up. And we've had a little bit of trouble at times reviewing, because QuickBooks can be customized so much, just where are the actual sales that you're getting your numbers from, because there could be numerous versions of sales or other losses that you have. And we've just asked people to highlight or mark like a little star or highlight the cell yellow, so that we know like where you're pulling your numbers from, so that we can verify the math. And that helps with reviewers not having to reach back out, and it helps us be a little more efficient. But if you can't do that, we can still figure it out.
Yeah, thanks, Evie. And that reminds me that also QuickBooks will put a date header on, and sometimes those don't correlate to the month for the information that they're sharing. So if your document says January 2020, but it's for the May sales period, we're going to have to send it back to you and make sure that they match up, because these are legal documents that we're paying against. And so we just need to make sure that the information is consistent for the month that you're demonstrating the loss.
Thanks, Laura. I think that was a great sort of summary of some of the main issues going on. I wondered if you or Evie or Dan could talk it came up a little bit, some issues for farms that are also processors that are not capturing losses of essentially milk sales to themselves, is my understanding.
Who wants
Yeah,
to talk about it, Laura?
I can start, Evie, and then you can fix what I've said. So for farms, for folks that milk their own animals and then operate a creamery, you should have 2 logins. One is a farm and one is a processor. So you'll fill out 2 applications, which means you'll be an expert at it by the time you get to the second one. And we understand that you most likely have not paid yourself less for your milk. So you wouldn't show necessarily declines in the price of milk on the farm side. But if the creamery is buying less milk from the farm and the farm has documentation to show that it's been dumping milk or giving milk away or doing something else with the milk instead of buying it from itself, then the farm is able to claim those losses in the application. If the creamery, on the other hand, is still buying all of the milk, and then it's the creamery's responsibility to dispose of any excess, or it's making it into product in a different way, those losses or expenses would be claimed on the creamery side of the application. And so it does get a little bit more complicated, and we all have talked to folks in this position, and it's really critical that you provide clear documentation about how the creamery is buying milk, or that there's a transfer of ownership of the milk from the farm to the creamery, so that we can be really clear in which business the funds are going to support losses or additional expenses in.
I think Evie liked your answer. She just
Very well said. Very well said.
I want to mention one other thing that came up from some of our review team members is that there's a dashboard on the application. And so after you hit submit, that dashboard will indicate the status of the application. So it's a nice way to make sure that you have in fact submitted it, that it's under review, and just something to pay attention to. And
go ahead. I was going to say one thing that Callie brought up that I'll just go ahead and mention, since it is the end of August, is that you do have an opportunity to submit 2 applications. That second application can only be submitted if you have a completed and awarded first application. So you've got to get that in order to claim losses beyond the time frame of the award period, which the application closes September 30th. So I would encourage everybody to go ahead and do an application year to date through August. We are working, and hopefully we'll have that second application live within the next week to 10 days or so. And so what that does is it gives you the ability to claim losses into the next month. This is particularly important for farmers or people who are still seeing sales decreases or declines. So again, you can submit a second application, but it is pending the first application being finalized. So it's kind of up to you. We would like to see everybody submit an application prior to the middle of September so that we can reopen it and let you claim additional losses, instead of folks waiting until the end of September to submit their first application. Just knowing that generally there is some back and forth that needs to happen to get the application submitted in its 100% correct fashion.
That's a great point. So I think now we'll open it up for Q&A. It seems like we have a number of people on the call, and if there are any questions that you have, we have some really helpful and intelligent people here that are willing to answer those for you. So you can put questions in the chat, or you can just call them out. If you're on the phone and you're muted again, it's *6 to unmute yourself. If you're on your computer, there's a toolbar at the bottom of the screen that will pop up when you move your mouse. Just click that microphone and that should unmute you. So any questions, go ahead and ask them to our experts here.
And they could be a specific question of your business, if you don't mind saying that to the group, if it's just a question of how something should be documented or things like that.
So I have a question. This is Janine from Cobb Hill.
Hi, Janine.
Hi, Janine.
Hi. So the December, the losses, so between September and December, are we won't know until the end of December what our losses are. So is that going to be a January application?
That's a great question. So by law, these funds have to be out of the state's coffers by the end of December. And per legislative language, we've got to have these funds dispersed a little bit earlier than that. And then we have to back up for processing time and application submission. And so essentially what it comes down to is that you are eligible to submit for verifiable monthly sales losses through September. And then if you have any events that you normally go to and sell a lot of cheese in the months of October, November, or December that have been canceled by a third party, so it's not that you've just decided not to go, but that the state itself has canceled it. So for example, let's say you sold cheese at the Sheep and Wool Festival. The Sheep and Wool Festival has been canceled as one of the fairs and field days that the governor canceled. You could put the cancellation notice in and claim the income that you received attending in 2019 as lost income for this year. So that is one way that we're allowing people to account for sales losses in that period, because unfortunately, the only other way we can account for sales losses is with actual comparison to previous years. And since the program has to close before then, we're not able to look backwards and do that accurate month-to-month comparison.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No. Well, it's hard to project ahead. Our sales are to restaurants, and a lot of restaurants are still closed, so it's hard for us to figure out what the losses are going to be.
Yeah, so we can't accept any forward sales projections, which is why it would have to be tied to a specific event that you had sales at that was canceled this year. So that is one nuance sort of detail about what is an acceptable expense. And that's also why you'll see the income and production tables end with September and don't go into October, November, or December.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I have a question that's related to that. If that's if an entire farmers market was canceled for the entire summer, can we show our, we have sales for that entire market, but they would normally go past September and then into the first couple weeks of October?
Potentially, you would need the written documentation. This is Diane. You'd need the written documentation of who canceled the market. Was it, the governor, was his proclamation around farmers markets early and they never decided to open back up, or the market association it was too difficult to hold a market, and they sent a letter to everybody saying the market was canceled for the year. And then if you can document those types of things and document the revenue you would have had in 2019 for those X number of months of farmers markets versus the revenue, especially out into October, if you're capturing the revenue in the month by month comparison, March through September. But if you're trying to go beyond that, then that could potentially be another economic harm. The market was closed, you use your 2019 income from that market versus the 2020 potential income that didn't happen because the market was canceled by the third party. But you're going to have to show some type of documentation that the market was canceled by someone other than you deciding just not to go.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That will work. Yeah, it would. In this case, it was the market board, and I think we have some emails from the manager.
Okay, but you can't count it twice. If you put in your month by month revenue, March through September, you can't claim that a second time. But the October isn't in that table, so October would be potential to be claimed in another manner in the economic harm section.
Yeah, that clears it up. Thank you.
I think building off what Diane was saying, just give us abundant detail so that we understand why certain things are appearing in certain places on the application, more than just a few words, so that we don't have to go back to you just to ask clarifying questions about if it's a duplicative, if it's been captured in other months. If you feel like there's any sort of nuance to what you're asking for, or it could be perceived as a duplication of payments, just provide us with extra detail so that we understand completely your application, because every business is so unique in how they do their books and how they make their money.
Yeah, and I would just add to that when we've had to ask for detail, we're not doing it because we don't believe you all or trust you. It's that we know that all of these at some point will be audited and we need it to be for people that don't know anything about the dairy industry and be able to look at these receipts and explanations and be like, yes, like to the penny, this is what was supposed to go out.
So I have another question. I just want to be clear about the PPP money. So if I say I had 50,000 in losses and reduced sales, and I received 5,000 for PPP, so the lost sales that I report to you should be 45,000.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. And again, that's one of the ones that really depends on the applicant, because PPP and EIDL could be used in so many different ways that if you were using PPP to cover payroll and you're not claiming payroll law or payroll expenses as part of your application, then it would not have to show up. But if you were using PPP to cover a gap in income that would otherwise be covered by the sale of product, then it would most likely be a duplicative payment, and you'd have to enter the amount that you received or the portion of the amount that you received that you used for something that you're also claiming in this application. We do have some good guidance, I think, on our web page for this program that can help you work through the details of those and how to calculate exactly what to enter.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And just for other folks, PPP is Paycheck Protection Program, and then EIDL is another federal program, Economic Injury Disaster Loans. So part of the suite of federal and state programs designed to help with COVID-19. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have one question, please. This is Stan from Mount Mansfield Creamery, and we had cheeses that we are still in the cave that should have been distributing back in March and April. That was part of a program. Do we cover that just under sales losses, or is there a way to have that for documentation for, for labor involved, the cost of making the product, et cetera, et cetera?
I can take this one. Hey, Stan. So for this one, I mean, you should document it under sales laws, but because you have more that you have to keep putting labor into this cheese that you can't move,
Right.
if you can't break that out on your QuickBook sheets to say like it's this, it's this amount of we paid is going to this cheese, if you could document in a written note or in a Word document just saying like X amount of hours paid by this much per hour has gone into this cheese for this many months, like that would be fine.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Other questions? All right, it's getting pretty quiet on the other line, so people can feel free to jump in. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen again because I wanted to go over a couple more pieces of helpful information. So this is a slide that covers, and this is in the original webinar too, that lives on the agency's page here, but this is a list of the critical documents that you will need to complete the application. So others have mentioned this, but I think it is something that's slowing a lot of people down, starting the application and realizing that you need more of these. So gathering all these as much as you can before you start, I think, is a great way to move efficiently through it. And then these are just some other resources. So again, the agency's website has all of the resources available listed there as well, and is really sort of the best place to start if you have questions, if you need help. There's a variety of materials that can help folks, and contacts to other people you can call and email to provide assistance as well. The application information sheet and application guide that will walk you thoroughly through each step of it, a W-9 download, the FAQ document, which we are constantly updating based on feedback from applicants, and then recordings of these webinars as well. And then here we've just broken out some of those contacts. So as I mentioned, the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, Mariah Noth is the contact there. Here's her email and her phone number. They are available to help people navigate the application as well. And then several agency staff will respond if you call us at the hotline or send an email to the agr.code response email address. We are working diligently to get responses to those as quickly as possible. And again, this is just our website. So pretty easy to find. Google's also will pop that up for you. If you Google VAFM, VAAFM, COVID-19, you'll also often be the top hit that you get if you search that online. All right, so we have about 8 minutes left of this scheduled presentation, and I just want to make sure that everybody's had an opportunity to ask any questions that they wanted to ask. So to throw it out to the group one more time. Again, *6 if you're on the phone and need to unmute yourself, but we are happy to help. So go ahead and ask those questions. All right. Laura, Evie, Diane, was there anything that you wanted to add at the end here? advice or tips or tricks or anything that you think people should know that we didn't get to?
I see in the chat that there's a question about other programs out there to help producers. There is a program out there right now about overdue utility bills that is available through the state as well. I think it's through the Public Service Department. We can put that link up on the chat. That might be helpful. Depending on where you're at with water bills or electric bills, don't know, but that's possible as well. And I think this that's everything here. If in the dairy world, USDA has the program called for milk production, for dairy milk production, the Coronavirus Farmer Assistance Program, and that is still open for application if you haven't used that program until September 11th. That's with USDA. If you haven't used that program yet, or if you haven't signed up yet, that's still open, but that's for those who milk animals, so that may not work for processors. Those are the ones I know of, but Laura or EB, anything else that you know of, or Kyle?
We do have the Agriculture and Working Lands program, where dairy farmers and dairy processors are a special group that can also apply to that program for non-dairy related expenses. So if you are a dairy processor that also makes jam and you cap out in this application, you can submit a second application in the Agriculture and Working Lands program for your jam losses as well. So that is kind of a unique category that dairy has the ability to apply for 2 programs in the Agency of Agriculture.
The only thing I would add, Diane, is just being open-minded to things that had to be covered because of COVID. We've seen some of this on the farm side, and there may be some small processors or others that may have had to get into this, or even large processors. But we've had some farms turn in where they had to hire an additional employee because of COVID. Their spouse, there was no daycare, and they had to take care of kids. And so that is like a unique thing that could be turned in under other expenses if you had to add additional employees or things like that, because a normal person in your operation no longer could work there because they had to take care of kids or things like that. Those are things, as long as you detail and document it well, is something that the program could cover.
All right, and if you are online, Lynn Ellen has placed some eligibility information for that Ag and Working Lands application if you're interested in learning more about that. There's also lots of information on our website in a similar place about that program as well. Abby's also just included the information about the public service utilities and the arrearages assistance program. Okay, everybody. Well, I will throw it out there just one last time. If anybody has questions, feel free to jump in right now. But if not, I really appreciate you taking the time. There will be another presentation tomorrow. You can go to the website to get a link to that. And then there'll be 2 more at the end of the week for producers. So we talked a lot about other resources that are available, ways to get in touch with us, ways to contact people who can help with the application. Please do reach out in any format that works for you to let us know if you're having issues or you have questions that you need answered. We're here to help. So thanks again for taking the time, and good luck and stay well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.